these early slides, the things that we're talking about match up very well with some of the efforts that are going on up and down this state. I think for so long our lament in public health has been that we didn't have the dollars to focus on prevention. And while, you know, the investment that we've seen through the Prevention Fund is modest in terms of the impact of the burden of disease, it's still very important to advocate and fight for these dollars and continue to fight for money to come through California. And then finally, we also want to support prevention activities that are being undertaken throughout the state. So you heard from a number of speakers today about the importance of prevention. You know, clearly it's the right thing to do. We know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. An investment in prevention will save lives and reduce healthcare costs in the state. So I just want to say we know that investing in prevention is important, but we can't do it alone. Health happens here, and it starts with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Batch. Committee members, any questions? I really applaud the kind of coalition building reflected in your organizational partners, et cetera. I assume this is taking place at the state level. Are you trying to replicate these alliances among local chapters of the member organizations?
Well, I can tell you this much. What's really nice about the organizations that you've seen, and I'll go back to, actually I could have stayed there. Mm-hmm. You know, all of these organizations, we have presence up and down the state. I mean, the Heart Association, the organization that I represent, we have offices in all of the major metro areas and a lot of the small markets as well. We could say the same about the Cancer Society, Lung Association, the Endowment Prevention Institute. They all have multiple offices and multiple scopes. So I think we're starting, you know, bringing together statewide partners with the understanding, and also I need to mention Kaiser as well in there, with the understanding that these efforts will trickle down to the local level.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your presence and your testimony, and most importantly for the work you're doing. We look forward to working with you. And we'll move now to our next panel. And now we're going to kind of some of the stakeholder and implementer panels. This next one, promising strategies to increase access to healthful food in communities. And we'll be joined by Scott Sporty, Chief Lending Officer of NCB Capital Impact, the California Freshworks Fund, by Kyle Kornfirth, Director, the Edible Schoolyard from Berkeley, and Michael Dimmick, who is President of Roots of Change. So I think we'll go in that order, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And Mr. Sporty, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let's see how this goes. Excuse me. Yep, it's on. I just need to get a little closer. So thank you for hearing us talk a little bit about work in healthy communities. And I'm here to talk to you about the California Freshworks Fund. I'm from NCB Capital Impact, and we are a nonprofit community development financial institution with an office in Oakland. And we have been fortunate enough to be able to partner with the California Endowment to develop the California Freshworks Fund with their catalytic $30 million investment to turn that into what is now a $264 million pool of funds that will provide grants and loans to develop new access points to fresh and healthy foods throughout California in underserved parts of the state. The Freshworks Fund is designed after a program that was initially started in Pennsylvania and is modeled after what is now the National Healthy Food Financing Initiative. And through that program, we are combining grant dollars, some federal and state support, along with investments from banks, insurance companies, and other philanthropic institutions to mostly make loans to start or expand grocery stores, corner stores, farmers markets, and community-supported or consumer-supported agriculture projects throughout the state. The challenge we have is here in California, or actually to model ourselves after Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was fortunate enough to start with a $30 million grant from their state. And here we don't have that kind of significant grant support, so we're having to be a little bit more creative. Fortunately, we have been able to access some federal funds through the National Healthy Food Financing Initiative to help us build some credit enhancement to allow us to put loans that are taking a little bit higher risk to help us put grocery stores in these communities. The challenge we're finding is that this is about increasing access to capital and to providing incentives for already successful grocers or organizations that have a real strong interest in seeing grocery in low-income areas. But they have a concern about moving into an area where there could be a higher crime rate, where there could be higher risk of theft. And in many urban areas, the cost of land and the cost of building a store is more expensive. So through more aggressive lending policies, what we hope will be lower cost loan product and some more flexible financing product, we're trying to attract those grocers into those areas. So far, the results are good. We are making our first loans right now, and I'm happy to say that our first loan is actually in City Heights, and the next ones will be in Los Angeles, and we're kind of moving our way up the coast as we're seeing increasing interest in the program. Grocery stores are just a means of supply of fresh and healthy foods, and they don't necessarily influence the demand. So at the same time, we're working with community organizations, first in the endowment's 14 places throughout the state, but in other parts of the state, to connect communities with the grocers and with the forms of healthy food healthy food access, so that it's not just about providing the access to the healthy foods, but helping people connect and understand and realize what the importance is to reducing obesity and other chronic diseases. We've seen the results in Pennsylvania. We've seen the results in other states that have started this. And we know that California is actually going to have an even better program because there's even greater community support, and the momentum has been incredible. So we're very excited to see the initial results and look forward to seeing the results we'll see over the next few months. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And we will hold questions to the end of this panel. And our next speaker from the Edible Schoolyard, Kyle Kornfirth, who's the director. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much for having me. So let's bring this down a little. Thanks. It's a really wonderful privilege for me to be here today sharing the work that we do at the Edible Schoolyard in Berkeley. It's very critical time for our policies to begin making the connection between health and education. And as Secretary Ross touched on, school gardens can really be a part of this conversation. And I'm here today to dive a little deeper into that idea and share with you what the comprehensive work we're doing in Berkeley looks like. Edible education reinvents the way we think and learn about food and agriculture, teaching students to make choices that are healthy for themselves and for their community and the environment. The Edible Schoolyard is an innovative approach to edible education. We're located at Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School in Berkeley, California, and we teach all the 1,000 students every day about what making healthy choices looks like. We do this by having programming in 4 different areas: the academic classroom, the school lunchroom, an organic garden, and a kitchen classroom. In the academic classroom, every 6th grade student takes a 9-week nutrition course called What's on Your Plate. In this course, they learn the USDA nutritional guidelines. They learn how to read a label. They learn how their bodies process fats, sugars, oil, saturated oil, hydrogenated oil. They do lots of really fun activities, like they light Cheetos on fire and they watch the fat drip out, and they all get really disgusted that this is something that they just had for breakfast. The other place where students are getting the message about making healthy food choices is in the school lunchroom. Most of our students are consuming their caloric intake for the entire day at school, and we have a responsibility to make sure that those calories are healthy calories and not empty calories. About 7 years ago, the Edible Schoolyard partnered with the Berkeley Unified School District to overhaul the school lunch program. And now, through One Central Kitchen, we prepare 10,000 meals a day from scratch, and there are no saturated fats. There's no high fructose corn syrup in any of the food. We're getting about 30% of our fresh produce procured from local farms. The Edible Schoolyard ties this learning together. Students are coming to the garden and the kitchen throughout their academic day, and this is where the hands-on education piece comes into, you can't just say, here's a salad bar, here's a beautiful salad, here's organic lettuce, here's a healthy tomato. You have to teach the students why they want to eat that food, where that lettuce came from, why it's important to eat salad. So the garden class, students come to the garden with their science classes, and in this space, they are involved in all aspects of growing the garden. We grow fruits and vegetables and herbs and flowers, and there is no job that the students can't do. They're engaged in real work, and they're using real tools to cultivate and grow the garden. An example of some academic connections that we make in the garden are to their 6th grade science standards around ecology. So we use the compost pile to teach the cycle of life and the energy flows, and they all do a lab on compost. So this is, again, reinforced back into the classroom, but it helps with their understanding academic concepts because they're engaging with it in a real world and a hands-on way. There's not a picture. Oh, no. The kitchen classroom is a place where students come to, they learn about history, they learn about geography, they learn about culture, they learn about math through the preparation of food. So while we're teaching them about dicing and mincing and how to hold a chef's knife, we're also talking to them about, where food comes from. This is an example of a lesson that we do with 7th graders. It connects to their world history and geography standard, and they learn about the 4 climatic regions of the Arabian Peninsula and how geography and climate affected diet. All of the lessons that we teach at the Edible Schoolyard are connected to a set of values and life skills that we hold. We really want our students to understand that their choices they make about food have deep impact on their health and on their community and on the environment. But we also have specific things we want them to understand just about growing and cooking food. We want them to understand that the compost pile plays an important role. That we want them to understand how to propagate, how to cultivate. In the kitchen, we want them to know what we mean when we say, we're going to bake this, or we're going to boil this, or we're going to mince it, or we're going to dice it. We want them to look at a recipe and understand that it's a guideline, that they can take what they have in the kitchen or what's available to them and adapt it so that they can still prepare something from scratch. We also talk about sort of more intangible life skills, like the ability to work together as a team and collaborate and to communicate. Students have to work in groups together to complete tasks, to complete, cultivating a bed or getting a meal on the table. While this is a very difficult program to measure, some of the outcomes that we've seen are improved health and eating. So while we were engaged in the school lunch reform, we did do a 3-year study about how garden and kitchen programming affects the choices that students make about food. And what we saw in that study was that there was an increased preference for consuming fruits and vegetables in kids who had a more robust garden or kitchen program available to them in their school. We teach essential life skills. Like I said before, students really come away with an understanding about where their food comes from and the ability to grow it and prepare it themselves. Students really do talk about how being in the garden and the kitchen classroom has given them opened a world of, I understand now why I want to care about the environment or why I want to care about my community. And enhanced learning, we teach the concepts in the classroom in a hands-on way. Students may not be totally into science or into math or into history or geography, but we'll have a kid who, never speaks in class. He comes out and he knows something really amazing about the pinworm, or just the earthworm. Thank you. And suddenly he becomes an expert in his classroom. So I just want to close by saying that the Edible Schoolyard is a program of the Edible Schoolyard Project. And the next phases of our work is going to be focused on bringing together a conversation of people who are doing these types of programs all over the world. We have launched a new website, which I encourage you to go to. Part of the functionality of the site is to share resources and best practices. We'll be publishing our entire curriculum on the site over the next year, and it will be available free for download from anyone who is a member of the site. So again, thank you very much for your time today and for allowing me to share our work.
Thank you, Ms. Cornforth. Very, very interesting. And we'll move to our final presenter of this panel, Mr. Michael Dimick, President of Roots of Change. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It is a great pleasure to be here. I am Michael Dimick from Roots of Change, and we are thrilled that this joint committee is focused on this issue at this time. It's very important work, and we think it's the cutting edge of what needs to happen in California around the future of health. And on our view, the food system is one of three root systems that underpin civilization, along with energy and water, and that the core of health is really around our food system. So I want to talk briefly about a particular project that we're working on that solves several challenges with one action. So it's a systemic approach. Tell you a little bit more about Roots of Change, and then offer some thoughts on the future of your work. The Roots of Change was actually begun at the beginning of this last decade by a group of foundations who had been working on sustainable food systems for decades with not a lot of results. And the goal was to pool some funds and work systemically on creating synergy in the system so that change could begin to emerge on the farms, on the landscapes, and in communities. We have a definite methodology which begins with systems thinking and really goes into the development of relationships based on that system thinking. So we've spent over $3 million in the last 5 years developing community groups around the state who are involved in policy making and thinking around food systems in their communities. Usually that means a broader set of values that underpin the food system. And once we've developed those relationships in the thinking and a set of values, we can start to scale projects. And that's what I want to talk about is one particular project called the California Farmers Market Consortium. Now, this project has two primary goals. One is to increase access to healthy fruits, nuts, and vegetables through farmers markets for low-income people who are living with on or receive federal nutrition benefits. CalFresh, for instance, WIC, others, SSI actually as well. This was a pilot program that was actually begun in San Diego, IRC, at a really in a community of diverse folks who had two issues. One is food security, and the other was economic development for small farmers who had come from the developing world. So what you have an opportunity to do through this kind of a project is build economic development for small farmers, which helps rural communities, and at the same time feed people in a better way. But also, you have the ability to create nutrition education through farmers market situations where people are doing tastings, demos, where chefs come in, work with the community on how to cook or prepare meals. The other thing that's really important about this, because we have a partnership approach that's now had 15 CBOs from up and down the state working in 17 counties, we've been able to work with these CBOs on their capacity development so that they have more skills, more expertise, and more relationships that become allies as they move forward. You can see a list of the partners here. And I think it's important to note that we're taking a lot of the data from all of these communities and sharing it among them so that it's really a learning community that meets face-to-face twice a year and on the phone once a month so that they can basically speed up, accelerate their learning process. There are 17 counties involved, 124 farmers markets. There are over 700 farmers markets in the state of California. Not all farmers markets in California actually accept CalFresh. All of the markets that we participate with do accept CalFresh. They're not only providing the ability to purchase with CalFresh at the farmers market, but we have helped each of the regions develop a fund called Fresh Fund. So when someone comes in, let's say with $2 or $5 to buy fresh fruits and vegetables, we match that money so that they can increase their purchasing power. That match money comes from philanthropy. So the goal is to actually change lifestyle by introducing people to a new source of food. And what we're finding from the results is that people don't need that incentive always. They use the incentive as a way to come and meet the market, find out how to participate in that market, become a part of that market community. And then they actually can change practices. So some of the results, 754 farmers have actually participated in increasing their revenues because this is a market. People that receive nutrition benefits are a market, actually. And that market is very important to these small farmers on the periphery of a metropolitan center. These are the farmers that need most to get economic stimulus and to develop their markets. 16,000 families have been aided from this project, and as a result, we are now part of a national study with three other organizations like ourselves, one in Massachusetts, one in New Orleans, and one in Michigan. We're collecting data which will be made available here in the state of California and to the Congress on the result of this nutrition incentives kind of work. And we were asked by both Secretary Ross and by Debbie Stabenow, the chairman of the Senate Ag Committee in Washington, D.C., to provide a memo on potential changes to the federal farm bill this next time to create a national incentive program. So we're already having impacts based on the limited data we have after 3 years. But we think there'll be a lot more to share in the next year. So these are our thoughts. We think it's really wonderful, and we think it's very important to increase the focus on the food and agricultural system as a base of the health issues in the state. It was mentioned actually by the chairman and others that there are many impacts, multiple impacts from food and farming systems that need to be considered. So we think it's really important to engage that, and we encourage you to do that, and we thank you for doing it. We also think that it's great that the California Health and Human Services has been lowering the barriers to CalFresh. That's very important for health reasons, but also for economic development reasons. That's dollars coming into the state. A lot of good work is happening there. We've been spending a lot of time doing outreach to actually sign up people for CalFresh. And there's more to be done in that area. We think CDFA has a big role with Health and Human Services to expand the amount of farmers markets that actually accept EBT and further improve CalFresh in different ways. We think it would be fabulous if the California legislature joined with the governor and CDFA and the health department to actually call for a federal incentive program to provide nutrition incentives for farmers markets up and down the state. And finally, we think the idea of creating some sort of a sweetened soda beverage tax, you're going to hear more about that from someone else later, that might create funding for incentives, matching incentives that were first pioneered down in San Diego and now in these 125 markets, might be a useful way or an effective way to increase the consumption of healthy nuts, fruits, and vegetables. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and very informative panel. We will open to questions. I want to acknowledge we've been joined by Senator Anderson. Thank you, Senator Anderson, for joining us, and again, for all of you, for your patience this afternoon. We're going to move through our questions and then get to our remaining panels. But if I could just lead off with Mr. Dimick on the consortium of the farmers markets. I followed in our region the enhancement for the CalFresh credit swipers that they get, that enhanced buying power. I think that's a great component. Are you able to do anything to motivate getting farmers markets to set up in more remote areas? And what we've been hearing are the food deserts. In my region, very often the farmers markets are in more urban, centralized areas. How do we get the farmers markets to make it economical for them, but also to maybe be in some more remote areas of our counties?
Very good question. Our first year, we were primarily centered in the big metropolitan areas. But in the last 2 years, that is 2010, 11, and 12, this year, if you look at our list on the fact sheet that I gave you, you'll see that there are more rural communities, Tulare County, for instance, Fresno County, parts of Monterey County, and in the far north, Humboldt, and other counties in Mendocino. We are actually targeting those counties now to help them engage this kind of work. It is often more difficult to get EBT systems up, but it is technologically feasible now. There are a lot of support systems from the state, and we now have the capacity to quickly bring those groups up to speed. And when there are farmers markets that, in some sense, resist the notion of doing it, we have found CBO partners who will act as the intermediary. That is, they provide a service to the farmers market manager where they actually do the technical activity of collecting payments and distributing tokens.
And that point's important also, because I know some of the farmers markets who have resisted accepting the food stamps, the CalFresh, it's because of the added administrative burden and not having the resources or the skill. I think it was our former colleague Juan Arambula from Fresno who led legislation here to allow for the farmers markets in California to voluntarily accept. So, and then if I might also just ask Ms. Cornforth, I'm just really impressed. We have some of these school programs going in the area that I represent. The enthusiasm of kids visiting farms or developing their own gardens, etc. Are you collecting any data that can provide kind of a foundation of when the kids enter the program, their knowledge and their practices, and then any longitudinal studies showing any change in behavior or in health outcomes?
A little bit. It's very difficult for us to conduct research in that way. It's expensive, and what we have done is we do a pre and post survey for sixth graders when they come into the garden for the first time and when they leave the program at the end, and we ask them questions about preferences, things that they may have not known before, different fruits and vegetables that may have been new to them, whether they, liked it or would eat it again or do eat it now on a regular basis. As far as longitudinal studies, the only thing that we have done is the School Lunch Initiative evaluation, and that report is available on our website. And that was really when we were hands-in of changing the school lunch, and that was the time when we could, really look at programs that had robust programming and schools that didn't. And when there was district-wide change happening about what foods were available to students, we could really look at what kind of education they were getting around the changes and what kind of impact that education made on their fresh fruit and vegetable consumption.
Great. Well, thank you. And my only constructive feedback on your slide presentation, if you could embed in there a video clip of the burning Cheetos, I think your presentation would be really educational. It sounds like it has a profound impact on kids. I think it would be helpful for members of the legislature to maybe see that in action.
Well, I'll give you homework then, because it's online. You can Google Lunch Love Community and the Burning Hot Cheeto, and you will see the video. It's fantastic.
Okay, and would you just repeat that? What's the web? The lunch?
Google Lunch Love Community.
Lunch Love Community.
Burning Hot Cheetos.
Burning Hot Cheetos. Thank you very much. And Ms. Atkins has a question.
Well, no, I don't. I just want to say thank you very much. The difference in the community, City Heights, that you've referenced is incredible. The partnership with the County of San Diego, the farmers, it's bringing together people in ways that we never imagined. And it's just wonderful, and I couldn't let you leave without saying thank you.
Great. Thank you all. And our next panel, as you make your way forward, promising strategies to promote physical activity environments. And this panel will speak to the successes, but also the challenges and barriers of getting physical activity programs going. We'll be joined by Genoveva Viva Islas Hooker, Masters of Public Health, the Regional Program Coordinator of the Central California Regional Obesity Prevention Program. Also Robert Garcia, attorney, founder and executive director of the City Project, and Ellen Wu, Masters of Public Health and executive director of the California Pan-Ethnic Health Network. And I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon and for your patience waiting for your panel to be up. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Assembly Member Manning and Senator Anderson and the committee. My name is Genoveva Islas Hooker, and I'm the Regional Program Director for the Central California Regional Obesity Prevention Program. And our mission has been to try to work with grassroots community members throughout the San Joaquin Valley to create healthier communities. I'm joined by a few of those community residents, and one in particular, Nadia Castillo, will be making some remarks in terms of the work that's been going on with the Greenfield Walking Group, and then I will follow up with some summary comments.
Hello, thank you for having us, Greenfield Walking Group, here today. We're proud to say that the efforts from 6 years are still blooming. The effort to promote good health and physical activity have gone way beyond walking. Examples have been our voluntary physical instructors and even our newest addition, our Zumba instructor. Every day comes with a mix. We have step aerobics, routine dancing, yoga, and our newest Zumba. However, this has become much more than a walking group, despite its beginnings as a project-like park where there was unsaved, involving drugs, gangs, graffiti, even stray dogs roaming around. Thanks to California Endowment, building healthier communities, parks and recreations, our police department, and many others from Kern County and California support groups, we are diminishing these bad influences in our community. Recently, we have been expanding the idea that there is no limitations to accomplishing healthier habits and that there is different open resources to do so. Even with the limited funding we've been coping with, some examples of safer areas besides parks would be illuminated sidewalks, our links to schools, using outdoors, campuses during after-school hours and vacation time. Within these past years, we are seeing people feeling more comfortable and safe, recruiting to many of these open areas that I just spoke about in our community. In appreciation to some of our members, we have promoted healthier ideas to other communities. The results have been nothing but positive. We are expanding. We have seen improvement, but our communities are growing and wanting more safe parks, schools, activity centers for kids and in general our families. That is why we give thanks to CROP for giving us the opportunity to assist the leadership and advocacy classes. And thanks to this training, it has given us the knowledge to keep on going forward.
Thank you very much for your testimony and for sharing what's a really positive report of demonstrating that people can make positive differences in their own lives and in the community. Thank you so much.
That's absolutely right. I think the story of the Greenfield Walking Group is a success story of how community has successfully overcome obstacles to physical activity. Safety was a huge concern for the community in utilizing their park. And so we really need to make sure that our parks are safe, that they're accessible for community use, that there are no stray dogs sort of running around, that there isn't graffiti sort of creating an inhospitable environment. So the aesthetics are very important. But in places that don't have parks, we also need to maximize existing resources. So it's important to unlock school green space so that residents living around those places can have an opportunity to engage in physical activity. I think, another important recommendation is that we really need to be conscious about efforts that are looking at preventing crime. So crime prevention through environmental design, the design of our community that's actually promoting physical activity, connectivity to transportation is important. Having children be able to walk safely to school is another promising and important way to promote physical activity in the daily lives of children. And the last point and last recommendation I'd really like to make, that it's really important to have this capacity built in our grassroots community members so that they can be active voices on planning commissions, on school wellness committees, on Park and Recreation Advisory, and that those groups really need to be welcoming to these community voices. So I thank you for allowing us some time to talk, and I'd be happy to answer any questions after the rest.
Thank you so much. And again, you're based in the Central Valley, is that right?
I am based in the Central Valley. CROP is a program under the Public Health Institute. I should also insert that I'm a board member for the Latino Coalition for a Healthy California. We do work in the 8 counties of the San Joaquin Valley, from San Joaquin all the way down to Kern, and our focus has really been at working with grassroots community members like the Greenfield Walking Group and building their capacity to be advocates and agents for change in their communities.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your great work with us today. Now we'll move to Mr. Robert Garcia, founder and executive director of the City Project. And welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's a real honor and pleasure to testify before this esteemed joint hearing committee members. The City Project is a nonprofit policy and legal advocacy organization. I am a civil rights attorney. I'm a lawyer. I come in peace. We do want to talk about successes, but there remain challenges. And we have focused for the past 12 years on creating places and policies for physical activity in parks and schools. We believe those are the 2 most important civic institutions to serve the physical activity needs of children. And tragically, both institutions are failing the children of California. That's the bad news. The good news, Marion Standish mentioned earlier that the federal government for the first time is prioritizing grants and funding for prevention, and that's fantastic good news. We're also happy to report that the National Park Service for the first time has issued a report called Healthy Parks, Healthy People US, in which the National Park Service specifically recognizes, emphasizes that there remain disparities in access to parks and green space, and there remain health disparities based on race, color, and national origin. The person's health depends more on their color of their skin, the amount of money they have, and where they live than on spending for health care or on individual habits. So the National Park Service recognizes that it is the responsibility of park agencies, national, local, state, to address these issues and fix them. And it can be done. We have created major new parks in Los Angeles. We, for example, received the Los Angeles River Award from the City of LA. We're very proud of that award. It only took 2 lawsuits to get that award and persuade the City of LA to create parks. But again, there's the opportunity. Sadly, however, right now, even though parks generate $4.32 billion in economic benefits statewide every year, the proposal is to close state parks. And that lack of priority for parks generates down to the local and county level as well, so that local and county agencies are defunding parks as well. The National Park Service also recognizes that there is more to human health than reducing childhood obesity, and they cite the World Health Organization definition of health, which is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And that's what the evidence shows. Physically fit students do better academically. They tend to stay in school longer. After-school activities in parks and schools are the best gang prevention strategy, and we see gangs, crimes, drugs, and violence as a public health issue. So one recommendation is to keep state parks open, fund the parks. The Civilian Conservation Corps is one of the most successful New Deal projects. It created 3 million jobs, gave people a sense of their own self-worth, helped put the nation back to work, and it appealed across the political spectrum. And in response to Assemblymember Pond's questions earlier as to where should the money come from, well, again, it costs more to close the parks than to keep them open, because the state parks budget last year was about $845 million. That generates $4.32 billion in economic benefits alone, not including health cost savings. So you get a 5-to-1 return on dollars spent in parks. Second, and if you need to, raise taxes. Repeal Prop 13. Prop 13 in 1978 led to the current situation in education and parks. In 1 minute that I have left, I'd also like to address physical education in public schools. California law requires physical education in public schools, yet according to the Department of Education, half the districts in the state do not enforce physical education laws. The Los Angeles Unified School District has voluntarily adopted a plan that Dr. Robert Ross of the endowment has called the best practice for the nation. That is good. The California Court of Appeal has recognized that physical education is a right. The LAUSD has adopted the physical education plan both under the education law and under the civil rights laws because of the disparities. Yet we still have to go district by district to the 100 districts throughout the state that have been audited by California and do not enforce physical education laws. We have to go district by district. You are lawmakers. I'm a lawyer. We ask for your help. School districts need to be told, enforce the physical education laws. Half the school districts don't do it. The good news is half the school districts do. We are happy to work with you. I previously submitted policy briefs for additional support for our positions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. And we'll now move to Ellen Wu, with Executive Director of California Pan-Ethnic Health Network. Thank you. Good to see you this afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. In the interest of time, I'm going to abbreviate my presentation. I want credit for that, though, in the future. So I'm with the California Pan-Ethnic Health Network, CPEN, and we are a statewide multicultural health advocacy organization. We began working on the intersection of land use and transportation planning and health because of its huge impact, great potential to impact the health of communities of color and reduce the disparities that our communities face. And I'm going to skip the whole statistics piece because we all understand that our communities face greater differences in all range of health status, and especially obesity, diabetes, asthma, etc. So I'm going to talk about land use planning and how that impacts health. Decisions about land use and transportation have enormous impacts. For example, research shows that transportation and neighborhood design directly impact the likelihood of developing certain preventable health conditions such as asthma, diabetes, obesity, depression, unattended injuries, and some cancers. Transportation policy also impacts our health through its effects on promoting physical education, its effects on air quality, and injury risk. Studies show that when public transportation is accessible, people tend to walk or ride a bike to and from train stations and bus stops. I took the train here today, actually, as a model for doing that, which increases their physical activity. Public transportation connects people to jobs, healthcare, grocery stores, and other services, and is particularly relied upon by low-income communities and communities of color. It also reduces congestion on our roads and the air we breathe. And someone mentioned the win-win. This is an example of a win-win. Motor vehicle collisions are a major cause of death and injury and are the leading cause of death among those ages 5 to 34. Road design, complete streets, speed reduction, and other strategies can all reduce the toll of motor vehicle collisions. Land use planning and transportation design to encourage physical activity can be a cost-effective way to improve public health, promote economic opportunity, and reduce health disparities. So, for example, for every hour walked each day, a person's risk of obesity decreases by 5%. So in communities that have limited access to parks and playgrounds, sidewalks, and streets, so in communities that have limited access to parks, playgrounds, sidewalks, and streets comprise the largest single component of a jurisdiction's open space. So that was a long sentence. Transportation plans should consider how streets and sidewalks can accommodate active transportation and serve as community open space. Health-focused transportation plans can help reduce injuries and fatalities when streets are designed to safely accommodate walking and biking. And lastly, studies have shown that healthy transportation can build community cohesion. People who live in neighborhoods with less traffic and higher rates of walking, biking, and accessible public transit are more likely to visit their neighbors, know their neighbors, and less likely to feel fearful in their communities, which has an effect on their emotional and mental well-being. There's been a lot of progress in considering health in transportation planning, but we still have a long way to go. California has taken steps towards including health in planning processes with the passage of SB 375 in 2008, requiring the reduction of vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions. Another important leadership step the state can take is with AB 441, authored by Assemblymember Monning, which would incorporate health criteria in state transportation guidelines. This policy solution came out of the work of the Strategic Growth Council's Health and All Policies Task Force, which has developed recommendations on how California can build healthy, safe, and sustainable communities. I also want to point out a newly published resource by Transform and the Department of Public Health, Creating Healthy Regional Transportation Plans, which provides a primer for the public health community on regional transportation plans and sustainable community strategies. It is imperative that our local, regional, and state transportation planning processes consider their impacts on our community's health. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wu and all panel members. And in the interest of time, I am going to move to our next panel. I do want to thank you all for your contributions, and we do look forward to building on the successes we've learned of today and linking these efforts around the state. So thank you so much. And our next panel, Promising Strategies to Promote Proper Nutrition and Healthful Food Consumption, will be joined by Alicia Sanchez, Policy Director for the California Center for Public Health Advocacy, by Tia Shimada, Masters of Public Health Nutrition Advocate, California Food Policy Advocates, and Samantha Graff, Attorney, Director of Legal Research, Public Health Law and Policy. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon and for your patience. And let me just point out to folks, you see our joint committee has dwindled some. But let me just tell you that all of your testimony is recorded. It gets televised on the Cal channel. And so there will be many beneficiaries of the testimony today. And committee members are often monitoring this, and their health committee staff point people. So you're on camera. You're going to have a huge audience.
Thank you.
So don't be discouraged. And don't be frightened either.
Well, after that.
Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Monning. Again, Alicia Sanchez with the California Center for Public Health Advocacy. The California Center for Public Health Advocacy's work over the last decade has focused on passing policies that create environments that make the healthy choice an easier choice. So the focus of this hearing is really important to us because we believe it's critical to reframe the dominant paradigm from blaming individuals for their behaviors to creating communities where people are more likely to be healthy. Again, the major emphasis of our work has been reversing the obesity and diabetes epidemics, which we have seen between the mid-'80s and the end of the last decade. The rates of obesity in California have tripled. Was this a massive, spontaneous, generational failure of willpower? That's not a trick question. We've been talking about this all day. Of course not. It was that the world around us changed, and that the change has impacted how much all of us collectively eat and drink. Among the biggest contributors to the obesity epidemic have been how many calories that we now drink in the form of sugar-sweetened beverages. These sugary drinks are sodas, obviously, but they also include sports drinks, energy drinks, bottled teas, any beverages with added calorie sweetener. In fact, the average American's diet saw an increase of 270 calories a day between the 70s and the millennium. The biggest contributor to that increase was these sugary drinks. Consider how the portion sizes have increased over the years. In the 20s, portions were about 6.5 ounces. This is what I bought downstairs today, and I wasn't compelled to even break into it after sitting in the hearing room for many hours. But this is 20 ounces. So that's what you're getting on average. And it's interesting to note that this nutrition content, that the label that we have, it says that a serving size is 1 bottle, so 20 ounces. I couldn't find an example to bring the 6.5 ounce example. In fact, the mini cans are now 7.5 ounces. So even the mini version is larger than the average version. Consider how over 41% of kids between 2 and 11 in California are drinking at least 1 soda a day. I would say 2 is not really, that's toddler, and that's shocking.
or that adults in California drink on average 45 gallons of sugar-sweetened beverages, or 42 pounds of sugar a year. We're talking about how much a 6-year-old weighs in the amount of sugar people are drinking. And this can't continue unabated. We've talked a lot already about the costs and the impacts, so I'm not going to go over that again. But thankfully, the landscape isn't hopeless despite all of these costs. Since California established school beverage standards and removed junk food in schools, there's been a small but promising decline in student rates of obesity and overweight. But before we get too self-congratulatory, 1 in 3 kids is still overweight and obese. I should point out we know of these rates and trends of student obesity and overweight because every year, every 5th, 7th, and 9th grader gets tested for physical fitness at school. This test, the FitnessGram, is the only objective data set for body composition, the way that we tell obesity and overweight, collected statewide. The governor has proposed the suspension and eventual elimination of this testing requirement in his budget proposal, and this would be a huge setback in the fight against obesity and student health if it were approved. So we urge you to reject that proposal. The school environment is one place we've made some real strides in beverage policy, but there's definitely more to do. Assemblymember Monning, you referenced the fact that we got sugar-sweetened beverages out of schools, but in fact we do have a glaring loophole in that sports drinks continue to be allowed to be sold in middle and high schools. Despite the slick marketing, these are not healthier. They're filled with both sugar and sodium, and they shouldn't be, kids shouldn't be drinking them. To reach sugary drink consumption more broadly, we need to tax sugar-sweetened beverages. The soda industry spends $500 million a year on marketing their products to our children and adolescents. And we could counteract this impact if we had a fund to do so. By levying a sugar-sweetened beverage tax, which we proposed through your bill last year, Assemblymember Monning, to levy a 1 cent per ounce tax on sugar-sweetened beverages, we could raise $1.7 billion annually to fund obesity prevention activities at the state and local level. This would significantly change the trajectory of obesity prevention work in California, and we continue to advocate for a statewide sugary beverage tax, despite not having a bill this year. But the state isn't the only game in town when it comes to sugary beverage taxes. In fact, counties and cities can pass sugar-sweetened beverage taxes in the form of a business license tax, and the city of Richmond is leading the way as it begins to explore this policy intervention. We think that there are some changes to current taxing authority that may be worth exploration, allowing counties to pass sugar-sweetened beverage taxes in the entire county jurisdiction as opposed to just in the unincorporated area. This expands the tax base to better align with the county's responsibility to protect public health, and I was heartened to note that the polling suggests that people would support that voters would support that. Additionally, it may be worth considering school districts as an entity that has authority to pass these sugar-sweetened beverage taxes, since they are, in fact, ground zero for so many of these obesity prevention interventions. Successful implementation there would have the added benefit of supporting both improved health and improved student achievement. So it's time for California to kick the can. In addition to supporting strong public policy, we invite you to visit our website, kickthecan.info, a national hub for the movement to curb consumption of sugary drinks. While you're there, you can take a pledge to drink less soda and invite your friends through Facebook to do the same. Sign the pledge calling on the industry to be a part of the solutions. I mean, hey, we can't let the soda industry have a monopoly on skillful marketing. We got to, try and enter into that avenue. And we can't let them continue to erode the health of California. And ultimately, that means passing public policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. And again, just that website again?
Oh, thank you. kickthecan.info.
Thank you very much. And now we'll move to Ms. Shimada with the California Food Policy Advocates. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Assemblymember Monning. My name is Tia Shimada. I have the privilege of working for California Food Policy Advocates, a nonprofit organization that works to improve the health and well-being of low-income Californians. CFPA works at the federal, state, and local levels to increase access to food that's both nutritious and affordable. We focus many of our efforts on the school nutrition environment. Over 6 million students in California attend our public schools. So those 6 million children represent 6 million opportunities to prevent or mitigate obesity by creating school environments that promote health and nutrition. Those 6 million students also represent 6 million opportunities to ensure that our kids are well-nourished and ready to learn every day. Fostering long-term success and health for our students is critical to California's social and economic future, as we've heard from all of the testimony today. This is actually a really great time to be working in the school nutrition environment. California is gearing up for some great changes, landmark improvements to our school meals. Among other things, the new federal regulations that are coming down will mean more fruits and vegetables, more whole grains, and healthy calorie ranges for every meal that's served. Some California school districts are going above and beyond. They're already exceeding these standards, and they're doing it right now before implementation is required. CFPA's Real School Food Initiative is supporting those districts that are working to meet the federal standards and doing so by preparing meals from scratch using fresh, minimally processed ingredients. The scratch cooking strategy is both cost-effective and it produces meals that are not only nutritious but are actually appealing and palatable. In addition to making sure that the food that we're offering at schools is optimally nutritious and appealing, we need to make sure that we're operating those school nutrition programs in a way that are actually reaching students. Across our state, we have more than 90% of our public schools that offer the federal school breakfast program, and we fail to serve 70%, or 2.3 million of our low-income students with that program. We know we can do better. We know there are ways to do better. If we offer breakfast outside of the cafeteria and after the school day, we tend to reach many more of our students. If we implement service models like classroom breakfast, we can reach nearly 100% of our low-income kids. Improving the school nutrition environment is not just about doing more to increase access, participation, and quality. We also need to focus on protecting what we've already done. California's policymakers and communities have worked diligently to remove sugar-sweetened beverages, well, most of them, and junk foods from our campuses. And throughout the state, those efforts are being undermined. So CFPA is sponsoring legislation this year, authored by Member Monning, to reverse that trend. AB 1678 aims to regulate mobile food vending that is targeting students near school campuses. And I'm going to spend the next minute or so that I have talking to you about why that's so important. Before, during, and after school, mobile vendors are converging near school campuses to sell soda, pork rinds, chips, and ice cream, a whole other host of unhealthy foods. This type of vending is happening near elementary schools, near middle schools, and high schools, and it's affecting kids that attend both open and closed campuses. Mobile vendors are congregating near school campuses using the portability of their business model to specifically and intentionally target students. Our concern with this type of business practice is very simple. Nobody should be allowed to profit at the expense of children's health. Mobile vending near school campuses increases students' access to high-calorie, low-nutrient foods, the foods that we've already worked to remove from our campuses. Allowing mobile vending to encroach on school nutrition environments diminishes the improvements that our state has already made, and it undercuts the important health messages that those improvements convey to our students. Each day, school nutrition programs give students access to healthy and affordable meals. These are critical resources for California's kids, especially given the tough economic times that we face. We can't afford to undermine school nutrition by inviting all of those unhealthy options to the school gate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shimada, for your work and that of your colleagues at the California Food Policy Advocates. And now we'll move to Ms. Graff, Director of Legal Research, Public Health Law, and Policy. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. My name is Samantha Graff, and I'm a staff attorney with Public Health Law and Policy. When Ken Yeager was elected to the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors in 2006, he prioritized addressing epidemic obesity rates in his community. He was concerned that 1/3 of kids were dangerously overweight, with low-income youth particularly at risk. And he was frightened by the prospect of his county bearing the ballooning price tag of adult obesity, which was already costing Santa Clarans $1 billion per year. Supervisor Yeager championed a variety of initiatives, including new trails, healthier vending machines, and a soda-free summer campaign. He also looked for bolder proposals to supplement these initiatives, and one came across his desk that was conceived by public health law and policy. We at PHLP are a team of attorneys, policy analysts, and urban planners dedicated to creating healthy communities using a health in all policies approach. As evidenced in an amicus brief we filed recently in support of the prevention provisions in the Affordable Care Act, PHLP promotes the tremendous return on investment, both human and financial, derived from disease prevention. One of today's handouts lists dozens of model policies and tools PHLP has created to improve access to healthy food. In addition, we have identified a host of constitutionally viable regulatory options to protect children from the $2 billion onslaught of food and beverage marketing that is targeting them each year. One such option is a local ordinance delinking prizes from salty, caloric children's meals. Fast food restaurants sell 1.2 billion meals with toys each year, and fewer than 10% of these meals actually meet basic nutrition standards. Research shows, not surprisingly, that a kid will ask for a healthy meal paired with a toy over a typical fast food meal that comes without a toy. So PHLP worked with the California Department of Public Health to develop a model ordinance setting minimum nutrition standards for fast food meals packaged with toys and other giveaways. This is what caught Supervisor Yeager's attention. He saw the logic in giving parents the freedom to select a meal without being hamstrung by toys luring their children toward harmful choices. He knew that the ordinance would help address a critical part of the obesity problem, capturing the tastes of children when they are young to get them hooked for life on fast food. He also thought it was about time that we all have a national conversation about the wisdom of rewarding kids for eating fattening food. In August 2010, Santa Clara County became the first jurisdiction in the nation to break the link between toys and unhealthy meals. Needless to say, the law generated media attention around the country and abroad. One challenge for proponents of this sort of law is that the industry has managed to frame it as a toy ban, when, if anything, it is a toy incentive aimed at steering kids toward healthier choices. Inspired by Santa Clara's leadership, several states and localities have introduced similar legislation. San Francisco passed an ordinance that got somewhat beaten up in the drafting process, but that still demonstrates momentum behind these types of policies. The groundbreaking actions of Santa Clara and San Francisco have had a resounding impact. A Stanford study found that fast food outlets affected by the Santa Clara ordinance were promoting healthier menu items and curbing their toy marketing practices. Meanwhile, the restaurant industry has begun making changes, no doubt largely in reaction to the real prospect of regulations popping up around the country. Jack in the Box has discontinued toy giveaways nationwide, McDonald's has announced modest improvements in Happy Meals, and 68 chains have signed up for a voluntary program that is taking steps to offer healthier selections. Finally, KFC Australia not only dropped the toys, but issued a statement that few would expect from a fast food industry giant. Quote, "We think the idea of toys being given away with meals has had its day. We hope this decision today will support parents in making dietary decisions on behalf of their children without being influenced in any way by pressure to choose the meal that has a toy." End of quote. This statement could just as well have come from Supervisor Yeager or any other policymaker committed to improving public health. And it shows the power of a strong champion in moving a prevention policy from controversial to common sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Graff, for your testimony and for all of this panel. For Ms. Sanchez, your focus on sugar-sweetened beverages, the discussion of efforts to try to look at different tax methods that would offset the public health impacts. Recently, there was a Robert Woods Johnson study. It was a national study suggesting that a 1 cent excise tax on sugar-sweetened beverages over a 10-year period would result in measurable reduction of stroke, heart disease, and preventable diabetes. This was peer-reviewed, medical community, so the data is there. And I think one of the challenges we face in all of the presentations of efforts for public policy to seek to regulate access or taxation, we face the charges of nanny government and inappropriately interfering with personal choice, what should be in the province of families and parents. But clearly, through the testimony today, the data shows that people work at disadvantages based on socioeconomic condition, place, and community. And I was heartened by the data showing voters polled believe that it does require a partnership, that these solutions are not rooted in individual choice or individual willpower, but really collaborative work involving community, and community necessarily involving government and policymakers. So I just want to thank you for the data-based testimony this afternoon, for the work that you're doing. I would suggest that we're not playing on a level playing field, and some of your testimony underscores the massive advertising budgets promoting unhealthful foods, in some cases foods that have zero nutritional value and proven adverse health consequence, and the $100 million advertising budgets targeting young people. We're up against tremendous odds when we seek to level that playing field where people can make informed choice and have good alternatives. So I thank you for the work that you're doing, for being here this afternoon, and we look forward to our continued collaboration with you. Thank you very much. And at this point in our agenda, we are through our panels. We do have the opportunity for public comment. If anyone would like to address the committee before we adjourn, would you please come forward if you are interested? Seeing no immediate people stepping up to the microphone, I think we are at the end of our testimony and presentation. And again, I just want to conclude by thanking all of the organizations, the individuals who participated today, and the hope that what we embarked upon today will create some new opportunities at shared information, collaboration, not just at the state level, but where it really makes a difference at the community level, and realizing that there are no magic cures to the challenges we face, but what does exist is some tremendous organizational and individual leadership to address these issues. And I think we need to take heart in the understanding that we're not starting from scratch. And we heard today some testimony of developed programs and developing programs that have made a difference, that are making a difference, and we need to build on those best practices and make those available to all communities in the state of California. I just want to close by thanking the staff who worked in organizing this, particularly Tanya Robinson-Taylor, who in our health committee has really spearheaded the coordination, the outreach, and the support data. So thank you to Ms. Robinson-Taylor. Thank you to all the staff who have worked with us on this, and to my colleague Senator Hernandez for co-hosting and co-chairing this. And finally, I want to thank our staff sergeants for helping facilitate our hearing this afternoon. And with that, we'll stand in adjournment. Thank you very much.